Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I'd like to talk about Jodi Arias. Okay, this is another Mormon-oriented, Mormon context disaster. Basically, more than a murder, it's really a disaster. It's really because it's a life disaster for the families involved, and it involves the Mormon Church. And I think the Mormon Church plays a very heavy role in this particular disaster. So obviously, Jodi Arias was a person who, I'm sorry, I mean, I don't care what the psychologist said, she was definitely unwell. There's no question. Unstable, unwell, and had personality issues. No question. There's no need to even wonder about that. Okay, but let's take a kind of a careful look and see what we can see from a cluster B perspective. Okay. And just as a foreshadowing, I think there was a lot of cluster B in the whole picture, not just Jodi, but I think also Travis Alexander, I think, had his own cluster B significant. I'm not saying he was diagnosable, maybe subclinical, but still major cluster B issues. And so, like, say the sparks were flying for the gasoline to light. You know what I mean? There were lots of cluster B sparks in the air to cause a fire in this particular situation. But obviously, without even getting into the details, obviously Travis Alexander didn't know what a firecracker, Lori. He didn't know what a firecracker Jodi really was. Jodi was probably way more unstable and dangerous than he realized. Okay, so just like Charles Vallow underestimated Lori Vallow, I think Travis Alexander also really underestimated how dangerous. Her name underestimated Jodi, how dangerous Jodi was. Okay, sorry, I can't even. Jodi Arias doesn't even come to my tongue. Crazy. Okay, so let's get started. Just kind of looking at Jodi Arias. Like, what was going on with this person? I mean, is it just it's just like with L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, was this just pure cluster B, or was this cluster B with some other issues? You know, it's like, well, let's take a look. Okay, so Jodi Arias is one of several children. Okay, it appears that she had several siblings, and it looks like none of her siblings, none of the remaining siblings, was ever, really had any like notable personality pathology. They're very kind of normal people. Her parents, I think, are kind of normal people. The only thing that stands out to me is that apparently her father was a drug addict. Well, had drug issues. Okay, so he may have used recreational cocaine or been kind of a partier. You know, it's on the radar screen. I don't know how much it means. I don't know if their family was absolutely the healthiest family. Probably not. You know, probably just average middle class people with their, the usual, we got skeletons in our closet. Sometimes there's some ugly things that go on in private and families. Um, but I don't think her family stands out like really like stands out as being like exceptionally toxic. I think they're just run of the mill middle class people who have their issues, probably things that we'll never know. But let's just first of all notice that Jodi did stand out, even from, I would say, like adolescence and beyond, as being maybe a little less well adjusted than her siblings. So this is another reminder, another example how personality issues can show up even in environments where one stands out from the rest of the family. Okay, just like you can have a family that's just average, not great, not bad, where somebody could end up being a drug addict, and it's like their brothers are fine, and it's like, what's going on, so definitely we noticed that Jodi was a little bit different than her siblings. We noticed that when she was, like, say, I'm going to say like in the range of 11, 12, 13, kind of in that range, maybe 11 to 14, something like that, like early adolescence. There was some weird thing where she did something like grow marijuana like in a flower pot or something, like something very, I would say, very benign, um, but which was taken by the family to be like a real, like a sign of something. So it's like, um, it's always hard to say when you're young, when a little bit of mischief really sets you apart as much as the family might believe. So I don't know that that by itself is really like a huge deal. But what I do know is that later on, she is clearly a very intelligent person. Okay, so for a person like her, and I mean, she's clearly intelligent. I mean, nobody should doubt that she's intelligent. She's not super intelligent, but she's very intelligent. Um, for a person like that to start getting bad grades in high school, okay, that is clearly not an intellectual issue. Okay, it's clearly a personality or some kind of psychological issue. Okay, and so my hunch is that Jodi, how would I say this? She has a lot of poise. I mean, she has a lot of poise, but at the same time, I don't think she really relates to people very well, or at least not when she was an adolescent. So she's very poised and she seems very comfortable in her own skin. Okay, but she's not very comfortable integrating into the world of, let's say, other people, especially, like, say, in the adolescent period. So at some point, she reaches a point in high school where she starts developing the profile of the typical high school dropout. Okay, not necessarily a person who's not smart enough, but a person who's just kind of on the path to being a dropout, you know? And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure if she went to like traditional college. I think if she did any college at all, it probably was at the community college level and probably very, very informal. I'm not aware of her having any college background. Okay, so my understanding is that she either finished high school very badly or didn't quite finish high school, something like that. Like there were issues in high school that did not match her intelligence. Okay. And then followed by a string of kind of really, kind of on the toxic spectrum of like boyfriend after boyfriend, kind of weird boyfriend kind of stuff. So basically, the portrait we're getting is kind of a loner, kind of a person who doesn't adapt well into mainstream, kind of someone who's a little bit fringy, a little bit separate from the crowd, and who ends up in a string of kind of not so healthy boyfriend relationships. So that's kind of the starting place. Okay, and on top of that, we see she has amazing poise. And despite this poise, she's not really able to integrate into mainstream, at least not in her high school years. So what does that point to? Okay, well, one theory that I'm looking at in myself and in other cluster Bs, and I see this in myself, I think that when people have kind of an intolerance of their own inner turmoils, okay, if somebody has a lot of turmoil or even just a moderate amount of turmoil, the people that just don't tolerate their own turmoil, okay, I think are more likely to develop sort of methods of systematically dissociating from just the turbulence of life, okay. Very similar to what we see with the Scientologists, in their idealization of the state of clear. Yes, you have this messy world, and for kind of sensitive people, who don't like to deal with all the muck and mess of the world, there is sometimes that discovery that we make where we can kind of just a little bit dissociate from the mess and sort of inhabit a cleaner, more orderly world that we don't have to deal with all the mess of the world. Okay, well, likewise with Jodi Arias, I think her poise, and she does have amazing poise. I don't think that's an honest to goodness, authentic serenity. Okay, I think like a lot of people who are clever and who have imagination, she discovered in herself the ability to kind of dissociate from the messiness and the turbulence of things that weren't really to her liking. And maybe, like, say, maybe just some of the dissonant, tedious crap of high school, which all people, just kind of the tedium of high school, that she just got to a point where she didn't tolerate, those kind of like chronic discomforts of being a teenager and just sort of dealing with all the, let's say, the BS of high school. And and yet at the same time this poise, so it's not like she's honest to goodness processing all the discomforts of growing up as a teenager. It's more like she's kind of learning to have this almost like incongruous calm, this like peacefulness, but really just kind of marginalizing and not dealing with all the tedious stuff of being, let's say, a teenager in high school. And then after high school, instead of, like, say, going into like the mainstream, getting a job, like, say, kind of in the mainstream of the world, she kind of sort of got a string of jobs, I think, as a waitress, working in restaurants. And I think in one restaurant, the way she really maintained her attachment to that restaurant was through, let's say, a relationship with a boss. I think she ended up in a relationship with someone who was like her supervisor or had more experience in that particular restaurant. So it was through a personal relationship that she actually stayed at that restaurant, I think, for a couple of years, I think it was. So, it's not like she doesn't really demonstrate to me like a primary attachment, like, say, to an institution or a company, but more like a link to a personal favorite person, which to me says she probably has an intolerance for, like, say, the tediousness of like say dealing with like a school or a company, and is a little more comfortable person one-on-one with a favorite person, where there's some kind of personal bond, so right there I'm seeing kind of like a preference for attaching to people, like specific people, and really probably not a high tolerance for dealing with the messiness and the tedium of dealing with a company or a school. Okay. So right there, it's just kind of a portrait, and there's a lot of people like that. Right at that point, you don't see anything that's immediately dangerous. Okay, but it's still something worth noting, and I think she did. She is showing kind of what I would call, a little bit of an antisocial pattern, because the so let's say the dissonances and the frustrations that she most wants to kind of put out of her radar screen are those dealing with, at least in the beginning, like say the tedium of dealing with a school or a company. I'm guessing because that's kind of what the pattern suggests. And so then of course she goes through this string of boyfriends, and then finally there's one boyfriend, I think it was from that restaurant, where they had kind of a longer term relationship. It wasn't clear that they wanted to get married, and yet they were living together kind of as a long term couple, and they bought a house together. So that the signs are in the direction of her having kind of a long term relationship, and yet she was able to drop that relationship pretty easily when she found a different person who kind of lit her flames a little bit. So right there, you're seeing, you might say a little bit of a borderline pattern, kind of like boyfriend to boyfriend, but I would say that what it really speaks to me is the classic situation where someone doesn't have a lot of tolerance for dissonant situations. Okay, a normal person can have a boyfriend, and the relationship is getting stale. You've had that boyfriend for, let's say, 5 years or whatever. You're way past the honeymoon stage, and then you meet somebody who's really exciting. So now you have a dissonance, you know. And some people can just tolerate the dissonance. Yeah, there's a lot of hot guys out there, and yeah, whatever. But just kind of let it be and just let it metabolize. And in her case, when she was faced with the real dissonance of meeting another person, a younger person, someone who was real exciting to her, very charismatic, she couldn't hold those two things, and she just kind of dropped one and went with the other. So that to me really reinforces a portrait of somebody who doesn't handle dissonance very well. Okay, and now it's established. Now we see the pattern from high school to the string of boyfriends to having the only reason why she had a long-term job as a waitress was because of one relationship with a person, and then she was able to drop that person later when she found another person. Okay, and so, yeah, she was dazzled by Travis Alexander because she went to Las Vegas and met him there, and she just got like bedazzled by the company that he worked for, which was basically just selling legal insurance. And so somehow she was able to get dazzled, by all the sales talk and just kind of the fantasy of being a salesperson. Because really, I'm sure selling legal insurance has probably just got to be a grind. But the idea is it's kind of a pyramid thing where you get people under you and you have other people making money for you. So it's kind of like, that MLM kind of structure. And, I personally believe that people who are susceptible to that are the people that, they see the shiny object and they don't really weigh all the other realities of it. They're kind of, it's kind of a bedazzled optimism and kind of an immature, sort of a low dialectical, dialectically degraded way of decision making. So obviously, if a person has more ability to hold, dissonances, okay, you could say, well, yeah, on the one hand, this is an MLM, and I'm just going to be grinding out, selling legal insurance, and I'm going to have people under me, and I'll be harassing them to be selling the insurance and inspiring them, I guess, to get other people under them, and I'll be a superstar. I mean, on the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, it's going to be a grind, and if you really can handle dissonances, you can really see on the other hand, and see the real picture of, you know, in reality, not a lot of people do really well in MLMs. A few superstars, but that's the case with everything. But then a lot of people who just kind of fill up space in the company, you know. So apparently she kind of fell for it and became bedazzled by it. And so that tells me she doesn't have a lot of dialectical holding where she can hold a lot of the true dissonances of that picture. And so basically that's low reality testing. Okay. I mean, low reality testing is another way to say dialectical degradation, you know. So basically, easily bedazzled, easily spellbound, by the, let's say the shiny side of that fantasy. And, so yeah, through by way of the legal insurance company, she kind of got tied into Well, I say by way of Travis, she got tied into the legal insurance. And once again, you see that she's connected to an institution, a company, but through a person. Okay, so that's an interesting pattern. So she, I guess her main weakness is really through personal connection. Even though she's able to drop people and go to the next person, that thing of being interpersonally connected is really strong for her. And that probably is stronger for her, let's say, than her actual connection to the actual legal insurance company, even though she did fall into the fantasy, um, you know, the MLM fantasy, basically. And as far as I can tell, she was probably more into Travis than she was into the legal insurance. But whatever. So yeah, she drops her boyfriend in California, and then she starts focusing more on Travis. Okay, and then they start this whirlwind, unstable relationship. Um, and so let's talk about Travis Alexander, okay? Because it's very clear. You don't have to scratch the surface. This guy was very superficial, and he was really kind of the paradigm salesperson kind of guy. I mean, really into the surface, really into just the charisma, and really kind of a superficial way of regarding his own self. Like just being good looking, dressing well, having a nice house, just kind of materialistic, and just not a lot of depth. And so, what would I say? I would say that according to the model that I have of cluster B, when people get very superficial and just kind of not very deep, to me, that's a sign of a lot of erratic arousal and a very low dialectical tolerance for dissonances. Okay, he's not living in the dissonances of life. He's living on the champagne bubbles at the top, and so he doesn't have a lot of dialectical depth. And the only difference is that I don't think his how would you say I don't think his instability was as dangerous as Jodi's. Okay, and so I mean they're similar in the sense that they both live in that sensate world, of just being very sensation oriented, sensation seeking, not really weighing the discomforts of life, not really weighing the dissonances of life, kind of low, degraded dialectical processing. But clearly one turned out to be more dangerous than the other. You know. So yeah, so Travis Alexander, is really into the razzle dazzle of being a successful person, kind of the fantasy of being a successful business person, having money, having a house, having nice cars, just being kind of the superficial, middle class person. Um, but and so, okay, and so then because I think both of them have sort of a degraded dialectical process, and I think because both of them are kind of just not good at holding dissonances. They're just capable of that really polarized, kind of like cartoonish, too good to be true sort of relationship, which is only destined to be, as a relationship, just as unstable as their arousal patterns. Okay. So you could expect that relationship to have ups and downs, a lot of, kind of surprising, dramatic things. And yeah, it turns out that Jodi was more of a stalker, was a little more creepy than Travis. Travis may have been a little bit of a light narcissist, like subclinical, but he was kind of, let's say, a really non-pathological narcissist, you know. Whereas Jodi was a little more pathological narcissist, a little more towards the stalking, a little more towards the real sneakiness, like extreme sneakiness. She would deal with her insecurities about Travis by literally stalking his house, literally just showing up unannounced, without even the courtesy of announcing that she was coming, to visit. So that's more kind of sneaky, more pathological. She's coping with her discomforts by going to more extreme measures. Okay. So, like, I would say that both Travis and Jodi would have trouble sort of holding dissonant, uncomfortable things in life. So, but the thing is that Travis wouldn't go to the extremes that Jodi would go to deal with her discomfort and the dissonance of life. Okay. In other words, Travis might, in some hypothetical world, might be jealous of a girl that he likes, thinking she might have a boyfriend, but he'll just feel bad about it and probably, but he's not going to, like, say, go stalking. Whereas Jodi, if she feels uncomfortable and insecure about the relationship, she is going to go stalk. You know, so right there is where you get into the pathological narcissism and more danger, because when Jodi feels uncomfortable, she'll go to greater measures. She'll take greater measures to deal with her discomfort. Okay. And so right there you have a pattern. And it's so funny because Travis had these friends. Their last name was Hughes. They were a married couple in the Mormon church, and he would go visit them at their house, and they would hang out. And one time he brought Jodi over to the house, and Jodi kind of came off okay a little bit at first, but then the family noticed that she was actually kind of stalking Travis in the house, or I'm not sure if they noticed that. Wait a minute, I think I got that wrong. I think they noticed that she was being kind of creepy, like checking his phone or whatever. They picked up on it, and so they even told him privately that, gosh, you got to be careful with this girl. She's kind of like stalkish, stalkerish. And it just turns out that while they were having that conversation, she was like eavesdropping right outside the door, where they were supposed to be having a private conversation. So you can already see that she is at a different level of cluster B. Okay. Now the question then comes, did she really just have the borderline personality that the prosecution expert? Okay, the prosecution hired an expert psychologist who gave her a borderline diagnosis. Okay, do I agree with that diagnosis? Okay, I do not agree with that diagnosis. I think she has borderline features. Okay, no question. The string of boyfriends, the fact that it's so pronounced in her life to have attachments to people, yeah, that's a borderline feature. And I think she has other borderline features, but you cannot ignore the serious narcissistic features that she also has. Okay. And also the elaborateness of her dishonesty and her deceptiveness, which I think is also ASPD. Okay. Now, do I think she's ASPD, like straight in the box? Probably not. I don't think she fits the pattern of a pure ASPD. I think she would have to have committed a little more crime as a teenager, not just having trouble being a dropout. I think you'd have to be more than just a dropout to qualify for ASPD, like technically. So I don't think she qualifies for ASPD, but I think she has antisocial features. Okay, so I'd say what I would give her as a diagnosis, if I were a psychologist, I'd say personality disorder (NOS) with ASPD, NPD, and BPD features, and also HPD. She has every cluster B. She has features of every single cluster B disorder. With I think even a qualification to say even like pathologically, like where she'll go to extremes in her behavior, to deal with her discomforts in life. So if I was the doctor, I'd say personality disorder (NOS) with significant substantial features from all cluster B disorders, plus I would say to a degree that is pathological. I don't know if the DSM has all that vocabulary, but I would say that. And I would tell the court that I say pathological. She'll go to more extreme measures to deal with her discomforts in life. You know, so she is a very escalatory person. She'll really go escalating, to very extreme measures, whether that's stalking someone, going to their house uninvited, or even who knows? I mean, just very extreme. So her reactivity potentially can be very dangerous, okay, or criminal. That doesn't make her an ASPD. It just means that how she deals with her cluster B features can result in criminality. Not every person in criminality is an ASPD, okay. But again, she does have ASPD features because the dishonesty is elaborate, okay, and she is very cunning and very, I would say, even very. She even showed in the way she committed her crime, she showed a lot of, I would say, criminal versatility, okay, which is, I think, even a psychopathic feature. So you don't have to qualify for one diagnosis, and you don't have to fit the box for one diagnosis to have real mental problems. And I think in her case, I would say she's personality disorder (NOS), not otherwise specified, but with every single cluster B feature and substantial pathological level of dangerousness. Okay, so then let's talk about actually, like, say, what led up to the murder. Okay, well, what happened was very similar to Charles Vallow and Lori Daybell. Okay, because what happened with Lori Daybell and Charles Vallow is their marriage is already going. I mean, their marriage is coming to an end. They were already starting to separate. They were getting along terribly. Their marriage was not going to last. Okay, but what caused Charles Vallow to die? It wasn't just that they were having a bad marriage. If he had been, let's say, wiser, and if he had kind of been able to see how dangerous Lori was, Charles Vallow could have eventually just said, okay, you know what? I'm not going to mess with this girl. She's going crazy, but you know what? I need to just kind of leave her alone. I'm going to go to Houston, and if I'll try to take the kid, but if she'll let me take JJ, but basically I'm not going to mess with her. And the same thing happened with Travis Alexander. Okay, Jodi was acting really messed up. Okay, Jodi was interfering with Travis's ability to try to date another girl. Okay, and she kind of like sabotaged, I think, like his efforts to try to be with someone else. Or if I'm not mistaken, she either sabotaged it or she spied on his telephone and did something like made a communication to some other girl or whatever. She kind of got a little. She like crossed boundaries with Travis in his personal life. Okay, and he got to a point where he just basically said, "Look, you are crazy," and it was like the same thing that happened with Charles Vallow. He got to a point where he felt like righteously he had to like put the spotlight on Lori and say, "Look how crazy you are, and the world needs to see this." Okay. Well, the same thing with Travis Alexander. He finally got to a point. It's like you crossed too many lines, and I'm putting you in your place. Okay, and that was a mistake because, relatively speaking, both Travis Alexander and Jodi, they're both cluster B. But it turns out that Jodi was the more severe dangerous type of cluster B compared to Travis Alexander. He thought he was a badass. He thought he was a tough guy. He thought he was a real powerful, rich person. Turns out that Jodi was the more powerful in the sense that she would go to more extremes to deal with her issues. So when he made the mistake, Travis, of like trying to set her straight, trying to say that you are messed up, you're dishonest, I can see right through you, you're full of shit. Like I'm totally putting her in her place. He didn't realize that she was actually more powerful. Okay, so that was basically the mistake he made. And I don't know. I think there were ways. I think that Travis could have survived. I think he could have been more diplomatic. I think he could have been more clever. I think he could have maybe kind of set the situation up where maybe Jodi could have found another boyfriend or whatever, or just let her off very slowly. She wasn't that crazy. I mean, and I also think it's so important. We shouldn't overestimate how crazy she was. Okay, I think in another situation, if she wasn't around, let's say, another cluster B person, and if Travis hadn't escalated so intensely, there might have been a way to just kind of slowly let the thing evaporate naturally because, Jodi broke up with other people in the past. And so I think basically what caused Travis to die, in my opinion, was that he escalated on somebody who was actually more escalatory. Okay. And he really rose the temperature on somebody who had the capability to get very extreme. Okay. And so basically, I think that was basically how this unfolded. So, can I explain why Jodi, has so much rage on the inside? Well, yes, I think I can. I think all of us who have some dissociation, like in the sense of the dissociation of like psychopathic, type 1 narcissistic, I say type 1 narcissistic, but all of us who are able to do that kind of dissociating thing where we just sort of have this like false serenity and we just sort of let things, you're not going to have to develop that skill or that talent if you don't already have real turmoil and discomfort on the inside. Okay, so basically, I'll admit it. I'm very irritable, and I have more of a temper than I want to admit. When my temper flares, it flares probably more than I'd like to. I don't like that, and so I think because of that, I've developed that ability to kind of distance myself from the turmoil, from the magma, from the lava of my internal being, because I guess the more uncomfortable the turbulence is, the more you have to develop some kind of false pseudo serenity. So I think that Jodi's sort of wonderful composure and her poise and her demeanor being so peaceful. I think that is really she learned to do that as a way of distancing herself from her turmoil. And so can we ask why she had such an inner rage? I don't think there's an answer to that. I disagree with psychology that there's really an answer to rage. I think some people just have more heat, and I think some people's engines are more intense than others. The difference is whether we get so dissociated from it that we no longer are integrated with it, and it becomes sort of a disembodied part of us that we no longer have really. We no longer have, let's say, our how would you say, like our human autonomy is limited because we've dissociated that part so far away that it's sort of like it becomes like too far away to manage, you know. So I think basically because Jodi got so much in the habit of not being close to her turmoil, she never learned how to manage her turmoil, and then the turmoil ended up managing her. And the same thing has happened to me. If you don't know how to manage your turmoil, the turmoil will manage you, more or less. But I don't think there's a reason why she had turmoil. I think she has a hotter engine. She's more of a race car, And if you're going to be a race car, you have to be a good driver too. And she let that thing go far away, and the race car ended up driving her. So that's my analysis of Jodi Arias. Thanks for watching.